Welcome to the Rugby Obsession Deep Dive.
Glad to be here, as always.
And right off the bat, I want to remind you all to subscribe to Rugby Obsession YouTube channel and newsletter from the link in description.
Yeah, definitely do that. Lots of good stuff coming up.
So imagine winning a professional international match 43-0. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a massive win, right?
Absolutely a total blowout.
Right. But then your head coach walks into the locker room and he focuses almost entirely on what went wrong.
Yeah, which is exactly what Rassie Erasmus did. It's fascinating.
Exactly. So today, we are dissecting how the Springboks coaching staff actually processed their emphatic shutout over Wales in Durban. We've pulled directly from the post-match analysis and, Erasmus's own commentary.
Yeah, we're really going to look at the underlying mechanics here, like how the defending world champions are actively stress testing their players.
Right. They're building a squad designed to just handle that suffocating pressure of test match rugby. So for you listening, this is far more than just a simple game recap.
It really is. It's a look into the architecture of high performance. How does a top-tier organization extract meaningful data from a blowout win?
Exactly. All while keeping their eyes locked on a pretty grueling horizon. So let's just jump right in. The contrast between that 43-0 scoreboard and the coaching staff's reaction is just, well, it's the most revealing part of this whole match.
It is, because, when a team posts a 43-0 shutout, the external narrative immediately shifts to pure dominance, right?
Everyone's celebrating.
But inside that coaching box, Erasmus was executing this highly clinical data extraction process. To really understand his reaction, we have to kind of strip away the scoreboard.
We have to look at the physical reality of the pitch in Durban that day, because the conditions were, frankly, brutal.
Oh, absolutely brutal. Wet, heavy field, and, well, we saw a massive number of handling errors.
Right. But for an audience that understands the game, if you look at the actual physics of what happens to a rugby ball in those conditions, it's not just that the ball is slippery.
No, the water on the synthetic leather fundamentally drops the coefficient of friction.
Exactly. Players can no longer rely on catching the ball purely with their fingertips, which is, how you facilitate rapid distribution.
Yeah, they have to trap the ball slightly closer to the body. They use their forearms and chest to secure it.
Right. And that mechanical adjustment is exactly what dictates the flow of a wet weather game.
Because catching with the body rather than the fingertips, it takes an extra tenth of a second.
Which sounds minuscule.
It does. But in test rugby, that fraction of a second allows a blitz defense to completely close the passing channel.
Right, and that delayed release leads to forced passes, which leads to knock-ons.
Exactly. And Erasmus understands that causality perfectly. That is why his post-match assessment was just so measured. He wasn't throwing chairs about dropped balls.
No, he explicitly noted that world-class players on both sides, South African and Welsh, were making errors driven purely by the atmospheric variables.
Yeah, he even took a moment to point out the physiological toll on Wales. They had just flown in from a punishing schedule in Argentina.
It's a remarkably detached way to view a game. He evaluates the performance using a department-by-department framework.
Yeah, he fractures it into highly specific components: attack, handling, maul stopping, defensive scrums.
But I have to say, evaluating a team in those conditions feels a bit like grading a school exam where half the ink washed away in the rain.
That's a great way to put it.
So how does a coaching staff actually extract meaningful structural lessons from a game where the weather has distorted so many of the normal data points?
Well, you isolate the phases of the game where weather is a secondary factor to biomechanical execution.
Okay.
The prime example from Durban and the area where the Springboks showed just massive improvement was the scrum.
Right, because if we track the progression, the South African scrum was surprisingly neutralized against England.
Yeah, and actually struggled against Scotland. But against Wales, they established total dominance.
And doing that in the mud requires a really specific technical adjustment, doesn't it?
It does. Normally, a dominant scrum relies heavily on the hit. That initial explosive kinetic engagement.
Right, to shock the opposing front row. But in deep mud, if you explode forward with that much velocity, the sheer force just destroys the grassroots.
Exactly. Your cleats lose traction, you hydroplane, and suddenly the scrum collapses.
So to dominate a scrum in a bog, you basically have to abandon that explosive hit and transition to what is essentially like low-gear torque.
Precisely. The Springboks front row engaged with incredible control. They established a root system with their studs.
Wow.
Yeah. And once anchored, they systematically dropped their center of mass just an inch or two lower than the Welsh front row, and applied sustained isometric pressure from the ground up.
And the Welsh pack was just constantly forced into reverse because they simply couldn't get underneath that South African leverage.
Right, they couldn't disrupt the kinetic chain.
Yeah.
That resulted in numerous penalties, allowing South Africa to establish territorial dominance.
And just choke Wales out of the game. That structural superiority doesn't wash away in the rain.
No, it doesn't. That is a pure, highly valuable data point for the coaching staff.
And, those handling errors we discussed earlier, they weren't just the product of a wet ball. They were also the inevitable symptom of a deliberate lack of squad cohesion.
Yes, the rotation strategy.
Right. But before we break down that controversial strategy, I want to remind everyone to please subscribe to Rugby Obsession YouTube channel and newsletter from the link in description.
Definitely jump on that.
And I really want you to let us know in the comments, what are your thoughts on this strategy of constantly rotating squads versus feeling your absolute best 15?
Yeah, do you love the depth it builds, or does it just make you nervous? Drop your opinions down below.
Because it is a philosophy that constantly divides opinion.
It really does. To grasp what Erasmus was doing against Wales, we have to contextualize it with the Scotland game.
Right. They fielded a fully loaded premier side against England.
Then they rotated heavily for Scotland and Pretoria, and honestly, barely survived a massive fright.
And conventional coaching wisdom dictates that after a near miss like that, you immediately revert to your strongest possible starting 15.
Right, just to restore confidence and secure a clean win against Wales.
But Erasmus doubled down. I mean,
Yeah.
He went right back to the laboratory and fielded another mix and match team.
He did.
I have to push back on this approach on behalf of our listeners, though. Treating an intense international test match like a proving ground seems, well, incredibly reckless.
I can see why you'd say that.
When you rotate heavily, you sacrifice those invisible threads of communication, the telepathic understanding of where your fly half is going to be before he even gets there.
Yeah.
Why would a world champion coach willingly self-sabotage that cohesion and risk another Scotland-style disaster?
Because fundamentally, Erasmus views comfort as the enemy of resilience.
Comfort is the enemy.
Okay. The underlying mechanism of his philosophy is that cohesion is a luxury, not a necessity. By stripping away that telepathic understanding, he forces players into a state of heightened stress.
He is actively testing their true baseline.
Exactly. He actually noted after the game that despite the lack of cohesion, the defensive structure was vastly superior to the previous week.
Right, and he said several players earned what he called tick marks.
Yes.
Let's decode those tick marks, because I guarantee he's not just putting a check on a clipboard because a guy made a standard tackle.
Oh, absolutely not.
What specific metrics is he measuring when the environment is that chaotic?
He is measuring transition mechanics and psychological recovery. When a pass is dropped because the players aren't used to each other's timing, Erasmus isn't looking at the knock-on.
Interesting. What's he looking at?
He is timing the milliseconds it takes for the backline to transition from an offensive attacking posture into a defensive coaching structure.
Oh, wow. How fast do they reset?
Exactly. How quickly do they communicate the new defensive line? He's measuring their capacity to absorb sudden chaos and immediately organize.
And he noted that certain players handled that suffocating pressure far better against Wales than they did against Scotland.
They proved they could function without the safety net of a settled team.
Which brings us to the ultimate realization here. This team is actively finding out who possesses the psychological durability to step up when everything just goes sideways.
Yeah, and this depth building isn't some academic exercise either.
No, it's a necessary survival tactic, especially for what is arguably the most brutal logistical schedule in international rugby right now.
The depth they are cultivating is literally the only metric that matters for the upcoming gauntlet.
Because after a brief rest, the Springboks are executing a logistical maneuver that is rarely seen at this level of the sport.
Yeah, they're literally splitting the squad in two.
It is a massive undertaking. Like, 26 players are deploying to South America to face Argentina in early August.
Meanwhile, a secondary group of 15 or 16 players, alongside specialized coaches and guys in rehab, are staying behind in South Africa.
Right, and their sole focus will be a highly specialized training camp just to prepare for the four-test greatest rivalry series against the All Blacks.
It feels less like a traditional sports rotation and more like a massive military deployment.
It really does. It's like Erasmus is a chess grandmaster playing two boards simultaneously. He's sending this rugged vanguard across the Atlantic to hold the line in Argentina while keeping his heavy artillery at home base to set up the board for New Zealand.
The military analogy perfectly captures the sheer scale of the operation.
But I have to ask, I mean, is Erasmus towing the line of arrogance here?
How do you mean?
Well, history is littered with top-tier teams who looked past their immediate opponent to prepare for a rivalry game, only to get completely ambushed. Splitting your coaching staff and your roster across continents just feels like courting disaster.
It would be arrogant if it weren't rooted in immense respect for the opposition and, frankly, biological reality.
Okay, unpack that.
Erasmus was incredibly vocal about the threat Argentina poses. He specifically reminded the press that Argentina handed the Springboks their most devastating defeat since 2018.
Right, so deploying 26 players to South America is an acknowledgement that winning there requires a massive physical effort.
Exactly. But the biological reality is the central nervous system depletion caused by transatlantic travel.
Oh, right. The jet lag and physical toll.
Yeah, when you fly across multiple time zones, play a hyper-physical test match at altitude or in heavy humidity, and deal with an incredibly hostile crowd, the human body requires 10 to 14 days to fully recalibrate.
So if he sends his absolute best players to Argentina, they return to South Africa physiologically compromised just days before facing the All Blacks.
Exactly the issue. By splitting the squad, he bypasses that physiological deficit for his core group.
Wow.
And here's where we bring it all back to the Wales game. This audacious split squad strategy is only mathematically possible because of the data collected in the Durban mud.
Ah, I see. By sacrificing cohesion and stress testing his fringe players against Wales, he verified that he actually has the sheer numbers required to field two highly competitive units simultaneously.
The mix and match risk in Durban paid for the logistical flexibility they need in August.
It fundamentally changes how you view a 43-0 victory. It wasn't merely a blowout. It was a high-stakes stress test that yielded the exact raw materials they need for the rest of the season.
It really was. And for you listening right now, the translation of this strategy into your own high-pressure environments is incredibly potent.
Yeah, think about how Erasmus approached this complex logistical nightmare. He didn't get overwhelmed by the sheer volume of the season.
No, he broke it down department by department, isolating the variables he could control.
But more importantly, he proved that true organizational resilience is built by intentionally sacrificing short-term comfort.
Exactly. If you want to know how your team will perform in a crisis, you have to occasionally remove the safety nets and see who can rapidly organize the chaos.
Passing the test when it is chaotic and messy is really the only way to ensure you are ready when the stakes are critical.
Spot on.
That is a phenomenal insight. It completely redefines what we consider a successful performance. And it leaves me with a final provocative thought that I want you all to mull over.
Let's hear it.
If a 43-0 international victory still leaves a head coach meticulously scrutinizing the minutiae of defensive scrums and millisecond reaction times to find areas for improvement, well, what does the elusive perfect game actually look like in the mind of Rassie Erasmus?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. Is a flawless game even theoretically possible in a sport this chaotic? Or is the relentless mechanical pursuit of perfection the actual goal?
Definitely something for you to think about as you evaluate your own wins.
Absolutely. Make sure to subscribe to Rugby Obsession YouTube channel and newsletter from the link in description, and definitely jump into the comments to share your thoughts on whether that perfect game even exists. Thank you for listening to the Rugby Obsession Deep Dive, and we'll look forward to you listening to our next episode.